Hello, friends. Before we start today's stories, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment which story you like most, where you're from, and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. They called it the Ashpeen Sanatorium, though the locals in rural Oregon just called it the place on the hill. From the highway, it looked like an abandoned monastery. Gray stone walls wrapped in moss, narrow windows that swallowed light instead of reflecting it, and a lonely chimney that coughed thin smoke even in summer. It was 1973, and America was still caught between war and awakening. I was 27, a fresh psychiatric resident trying to prove myself. My name was Dr. Alan Mercer back then, before I stopped using the title altogether. The residency at Ashpine was my first real assignment. My supervisor, Dr. Leonard Voss, was something of a legend in psychiatric circles. He'd written papers about psychochemical introspection and the potential of altered states in trauma treatment. But what made him infamous wasn't his research, it was his eyes. Cold, pale, analytical, like twin scalpel blades behind silver-rimmed glasses. Ashpine wasn't a normal facility. It sat 30 miles north of a small town called Briar's Edge, surrounded by miles of pine forest and fog-drenched roads that looked the same in every direction. It housed around 200 patients, mostly women, though no one ever explained why the gender ratio was so skewed. When I arrived, I noticed something off right away. The front gate had a military-style checkpoint, guards in brown uniforms, no hospital insignia, and rifles that looked far too new for a medical facility. My clearance badge had a gold strip along the bottom that allowed me into the main wards, but not beyond the East Wing. I asked another resident, Dr. Ellis, about it. He just shrugged. "East Wing's closed for renovations," he said. "Been that way for years." He lied. I could tell. The main building had the heavy silence of a place that kept secrets. The air smelled of antiseptic, rust, and something faintly metallic, like old blood washed too many times to disappear. The corridors were long, lined with institutional green walls that reflected the buzzing hum of fluorescent lights. Patients shuffled quietly, eyes glazed, some muttering, others simply staring at invisible things. Dr. Voss was cordial during orientation, his voice steady and soft, almost hypnotic. "You'll find that Ashpine operates differently," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Our methods are progressive, unconventional, but necessary. The mind resists healing, Dr. Mercer. Sometimes to fix it, we must take it apart first." I laughed nervously, thinking it was metaphor. It wasn't. 2 weeks in, Dr. Voss invited me to join a specialized program. He said it had federal funding, that it involved experimental trauma recovery methods for female patients suffering from severe psychological collapse. He called it Project Echelon. The first rule was confidentiality. I had to sign a 12-page non-disclosure agreement stamped with a federal seal I didn't recognize. Not Department of Health, not the VA. The project operated out of the basement level, which wasn't on any of the hospital's maps. That night, I followed Dr. Voss down a stairwell marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The air grew colder with every step. By the time we reached the door at the bottom, my breath fogged in the beam of the flickering fluorescent lights. Inside was a repurposed surgical suite. White tile floors, steel tables, and a reclining chair bolted to the ground. Observation glass lined one wall, behind which two men in suits watched silently, notebooks in hand. The first patient was Margaret Ellery, 29 years old, diagnosed with catatonic depression after the drowning of her twin daughters. She sat motionless, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor. Dr. Voss prepared a sugar cube, carefully dropping a transparent liquid from a small amber vial onto it. "Lysergic acid diethylamide," he said almost reverently. 200 micrograms, enough to open the door, but not blow it off its hinges. He handed me a clipboard filled with data charts and observation sheets labeled Subject Response Index. Within 40 minutes, Margaret began to tremble. Her pupils expanded until her irises vanished into darkness. She said the walls were melting, that she could hear her daughters singing through the air vents. Dr. Voss leaned closer, speaking in a soothing tone. "Follow their voices, Margaret. They're waiting. Walk toward them." She began to sob, laughing between cries, whispering apologies. Her fingers reached out, tracing invisible shapes in the air. Then she screamed, not in fear, but in revelation. The monitors spiked, her pulse skyrocketed. I moved to administer a sedative, but Dr. Voss grabbed my wrist with surprising force. His voice was calm but firm. "Do not interfere. This is the catharsis phase." For 3 hours, she screamed, begged, and spoke to her daughters. When it was over, she collapsed in the chair, muttering one sentence over and over. "They said it's not real. They said it's not real." When she finally fell asleep, I noticed her fingernails were bloody. She'd clawed at her own arms until skin peeled. Dr. Voss didn't look disturbed. He looked thrilled. Over the following weeks, I was allowed to observe more sessions. There were 10 women in total, all diagnosed with deep trauma. Rape survivors, abuse victims, mothers who'd lost children. Each was given escalating doses of LSD combined with what Dr. Voss called neural disinhibitors. He claimed these compounds temporarily erased emotional resistance, allowing the brain to rewire traumatic memories. But the sessions became more grotesque. Patients would scream in voices that didn't sound human. One woman, Evelyn Ross, began speaking fluent German, though her records showed she'd never learned a word. Another tried to claw her way through a cement wall, saying she had to get out before the red door closed. The staff who weren't part of the project pretended it didn't exist. When I asked the nurses about the basement ward, they'd go quiet, pretending not to hear. One night, I stayed late to update patient logs and noticed an unmarked metal door near the East Wing elevator. The lock had a numeric keypad. I tried my badge. Nothing. But when someone opened it from the inside, I glimpsed something that made my blood run cold. Rows of hospital beds, each occupied by a woman staring blankly at the ceiling. 4 drips attached to both arms, electrodes on their temples, machines humming softly. None of them moved. None blinked. As the door closed again, I caught one glimpse of the wall behind them, a government seal, and beneath it, a single word: echelon continuity. The turning point came with patient number 11, Clara Hensley, 26, a former nurse who'd attempted suicide after losing her infant in a house fire. Dr. Voss claimed she was on the brink of what he called total cognitive purification. The session began like the others: dim light, soft music, the hum of old projectors recording the data. But this time, He increased her dose to 450 micrograms, an amount that could break even a stable mind. Clara started laughing uncontrollably, whispering to something none of us could see. She said there was a door in the light, that someone behind it was calling her name. Then, suddenly, her laughter stopped. Her head snapped toward me, not at Dr. Voss, not the ceiling, directly at me. "He's next," she said in a hollow voice. "They already opened his door." I felt ice crawl up my spine. She began clawing her abdomen, screaming that her baby was inside, that the fire didn't take it. We did. Blood spilled across the chair, seeping into the cracks of the floor tiles. I lunged for the tranquilizer, but Dr. Voss shouted, "No sedation!" She's crossing the threshold. Behind the observation glass, the two government men were filming. One of them actually smiled. By the time we restrained her, Clara had lost consciousness. Her pulse was faint, her body covered in lacerations. When I returned the next morning, her room was empty, bed stripped bare. I checked the logs. Her file was gone. No entry, no discharge notice, nothing. When I confronted Dr. Voss, he told me she'd been relocated to a recovery facility in Maine. But his eyes flickered, the first time I'd seen uncertainty behind that gray stare. That night, I decided to find out what Project Echelon really was. The rain had stopped by morning, but the silence that followed was worse. The air inside Ward C was heavy with the smell of disinfectant and burnt dust. The fluorescent bulbs flickered above us, buzzing like trapped flies. Dr. Marcus Hale stood behind the observation glass again, his white coat crisp, his eyes hollow. He wasn't just a scientist anymore. There was something haunted in his gaze, something that suggested the project had gone far beyond his control. They said patient number 27 hadn't slept in 41 hours. They said his body was in a catatonic state, but he was talking in a voice that wasn't his. "We've seen the other side," he murmured through cracked lips. "The ones in the dark don't want to go back." The nurses kept their distance. Only Dr. Hale and Dr. Linwood dared to approach him. The tape recorder whirred softly, capturing every word. "Tell me what you saw," Hale asked. Patient number 27 smiled, a slow, broken smile that stretched his face unnaturally. Then he whispered, "The corridors below the corridors." "You built this place over them," Dr. Linwood frowned. "Who are they?" "The first ones," the patient rasped. "You called them subjects. We called them doors." That evening, Dr. Hale descended to sub-level 3, a restricted area of the hospital where the earliest tests of Project Erebus had taken place. The elevator creaked as it descended, stopping with a metallic groan. The lights inside flickered dimly, and for a moment, he thought he heard something scratching against the walls. When the doors opened, the hallway was bathed in sickly green light. Rows of steel doors lined both sides, each marked only by a number. He passed room 104, where the first patient had bitten through his own tongue. Then room 106, where someone had written, "Don't let them in," on the walls in their own blood. He paused at room 109, the one sealed with rusted chains. The old maintenance man, Eli, had once told him that room 109 was where the sound began. Before Project Erebus had an official name, before the government funding, this room had been used for something else, a sensory gateway test. Hale fumbled with his flashlight, breathing heavily. The beam cut through the dust, and he could see the old government seal etched above the door. property of U.S. Defense Research Division, 1958. He touched the metal and felt a vibration, faint but rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Back in Ward C, patient number 27 had gone silent. His eyes were open, but he wasn't responding. His mouth moved, forming words that only the tape recorder seemed to catch. "He's coming down." He shouldn't have gone there. Dr. Linwood played the tape again later that night. There was static, faint at first, then a low hum beneath it, a pulse that seemed almost organic. And through the distortion, a voice neither male nor female whispered, "Open the room, Marcus." Linwood froze. That wasn't on the original recording. He looked around. The other staff had already left. Only the shadows moved along the hallway windows. Experiment 19. Subject reports seeing tunnels of light. Claim to communicate with entities beyond visible reality. Duration: 6 minutes before cardiac arrest. Experiment 20. Subject began repeating unknown phrases in Latin. Language knowledge: none. Seizure onset: 4 minutes. Fatality recorded. Experiment 21. Successful. Subject survived full dose exposure. Reports of visual distortions and communication with observers. Ongoing hallucinations recorded. Dr. Hale flipped through the notes with trembling hands. Every subject after Experiment 21 had described the same presence. The observer in the doorway. Midnight. Hale stood before the two-way mirror again, staring at patient number 27 strapped to the gurney. The patient's heart rate monitor pulsed erratically. "You opened it," the patient said suddenly. "You heard them. Now they'll follow you home." Dr. Hale slammed his fist on the glass. "What are you talking about?" The patient laughed, a dry, throaty laugh that dissolved into a scream. His eyes rolled back, and the room lights surged bright white for a second, then burst. Sparks rained from the ceiling, the power cut, and in the brief darkness, Dr. Hale saw movement behind the mirror, a silhouette not his own. He stumbled back, heart hammering. When the emergency lights flickered on, there were handprints on the glass, on his side. The next morning, Linwood received an unmarked package in his office. Inside was a black reel-to-reel tape, labeled only with the number 109. He loaded it into the player, hit play, and waited. At first, silence, then faint breathing, then a man's voice whispering in panic. "We tried to map the human mind, but the map wasn't empty. It was already occupied." There was a loud crash, and a woman screamed, "Turn it off!" Then static. And finally, a single phrase repeated over and over, growing distorted each time. Project Erebus never ended. Linwood stopped the tape. He sat there in silence, sweat dripping down his temple. Outside, down the hallway, the lights began to flicker again. And somewhere deep below, in the sealed corridor of sub-level 3, room 109 clicked open. The hospital had changed. It wasn't just the flickering lights or the smell of burnt wires. It was something deeper, something that pulsed beneath the floorboards, breathing through the cracks in the walls. After the incident with the black tape, Dr. Linwood resigned without a word. He left his office key on the desk, his resignation typed but unsigned. No one ever saw him again. Dr. Marcus Hale stayed because he had to know the truth, because curiosity, once awakened, is more dangerous than madness itself. He began to hear it again, that faint hum, the same sound from the reel-to-reel, the same pulse from behind the sealed door of room 109. The stairwell leading to sub-level 3 was colder now. His breath fogged in front of him as he descended. Every step echoed. Somewhere above him, a fluorescent bulb burst with a sharp pop. He carried a lantern, his flashlight, and a revolver, though he didn't remember taking the gun from security. As he reached the bottom, he noticed the old steel door of room 109 was slightly ajar. Chains that once held it shut were broken. Not cut, but snapped, as if something inside had forced its way out. He pushed the door open. A rush of stale, frozen air escaped, carrying the smell of mildew and something else, something sweet and rotten. Inside, the walls were covered with chalk markings, spirals, sigils, equations. In the center of the room was an old sensory isolation tank, half filled with dark water. The power cords were still connected, humming softly. He moved closer. The surface rippled. And then, from the black water, a voice whispered. His own voice. "Marcus, you shouldn't have come back." He froze. The reflection in the water wasn't his. It smiled, wide and unnatural. "You opened the gate once. Now it stays open." The reflection moved on its own, even when he stood still. It leaned closer, eyes wide, pupils dilated. "We live in the mind, Marcus. And you built the door." Then the water exploded outward, drenching him in freezing darkness. He fell back, choking, gasping. But the floor beneath him was no longer concrete. He was standing in a hallway, endless, sterile, and silent. White lights buzzed overhead, stretching into infinity. On both sides, doors, hundreds of them, each marked with a number. He walked past them slowly. 101, 102, 103. Behind every door, faint whispers, some pleading, some laughing, some screaming. He stopped at room 109. The number was scratched into the metal. He reached for the handle, his hand trembling. The moment he touched it, every light in the corridor went out. And from the blackness, dozens of voices whispered at once. "You were never the doctor, Marcus. You were the experiment." The floor vanished beneath him. He fell, not through space, but through memory. Recovered transcript, dated November 12, 1974. Subject 27, Dr. Marcus Hale. Volunteer for cognitive threshold experiment. Substance, compound 47A, LSD variant. Objective, observe neurological response to prolonged exposure to induced hallucination. Result, subject experienced full detachment from consensus reality. Believed he was the overseeing physician. Condition irreversible. File marked, terminated. He opened his eyes. He was back in the observation room. The hospital lights were steady now. No flicker, no static. Through the glass, Dr. Linwood was watching him, clipboard in hand. "Good morning, Marcus," Linwood said calmly. "Can you tell me where you are?" Marcus blinked. "You're the patient." "I'm..." Linwood shook his head. "No, Marcus. You've been inside the tank for 13 hours. Project Erebus is over." Marcus tried to move, but his wrists were bound to the bed. He looked down at his arms, thin, pale, with IV marks. He looked into the mirror, but the reflection staring back wasn't his own face. The mouth of the reflection curled into a smile, and then it whispered, "You opened the door. Now let us through." The lights in the ward flickered once, twice. Then the emergency alarm began to scream. When the staff arrived, they found the observation glass shattered from the inside. Marcus Hale was gone. All that remained was the tape recorder, still spinning, playing one final line of audio. Project Erebus never ended. A man in a black suit walked into the cold storage archive. He placed a sealed envelope into a metal cabinet marked Projects Terminated, Classified. The file read, Project Erebus, Declassified Level Red Status, Containment Breach. Unknown entities persist. The man hesitated, then added a handwritten note. Do not reopen room 109. As he turned to leave, the lights above him flickered. The cabinet door creaked open behind him, and a faint hum, low, rhythmic, filled the air again. They told me it was just an internship, a chance to assist some of the brightest psychiatric minds in the country. A rare opportunity, my professor had called it. The kind that could make a young researcher's career. That was August of 1978. I was 24, and I had no idea what I was walking into. The Mason Psychiatric Research Facility stood on the edge of nowhere, surrounded by thick pine forest, 100 miles from the nearest city. It wasn't listed on any public record, not in the state archives, not in the university directory, not even in federal databases. The bus dropped me off 3 miles down the road. I walked the rest of the way in silence, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. The air smelled of rain and rust. The first thing I noticed when I reached the gates was the silence. No birds, no wind. Just the faint hum of power lines overhead and the distant drone of a generator. 2 guards met me at the entrance, both wearing plain gray uniforms with no insignia. Their eyes were hidden behind mirrored glasses. You're the new one? Yes, Daniel Mercer, psychology intern from... We know who you are. They didn't check my ID. They just waved me through. Inside, the facility looked less like a hospital and more like a military compound. Long concrete hallways, greenish fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant everywhere. The walls were lined with security cameras that didn't move, like dead eyes. At the reception desk, a woman in a white coat handed me a clipboard. Sign here, she said flatly. It was a non-disclosure agreement, 12 pages long. Every line referenced terms I didn't recognize. Behavioral regression protocols, cognitive compliance trials, Project H47. At the bottom was a line that read, by signing this document, you relinquish all legal recourse against the United States Department of Behavioral Sciences. I hesitated. She didn't look up from her typewriter. Is this government funded? I asked. She paused, then smiled faintly. Everything important is. I signed. They led me to the North Wing, where I finally met Dr. Adrian Clemens, the project director. He was older than I expected, early 50s, gray hair, thin glasses, a neatly trimmed mustache. His voice was calm, deliberate, and cold. Mr. Mercer, he said, shaking my hand. We're conducting research here that will redefine psychiatric science. Hypnosis? I asked. That's what my assignment said. He smiled. Not hypnosis as you know it. What we're studying here is something deeper. We call it controlled dissociation. He guided me into his office, a room filled with reel-to-reel machines, oscilloscopes, and medical charts. On the far wall hung a large government seal, half covered by a map of the human brain. You see, Daniel, he continued, lighting a cigarette, when a mind is fractured through trauma, suggestion, or chemical induction, it becomes pliable, malleable. He exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. Our goal is to reshape that mind, to rebuild it according to our design. He said it so casually, like he was talking about fixing a clock. That night, I was assigned to the test wing, where most of the experiments took place. The air there felt heavier, like static clinging to your skin. Each room had a thick glass window and an intercom panel. Inside were reclining chairs, EEG monitors, and tape machines looping soft voices. Sometimes I could hear whispers through the walls, faint murmurs that didn't sound like any language I knew. My job was simple: observe and record. Patients were brought in, placed under hypnosis, and given a series of auditory commands. I wasn't allowed to see what those commands were. But I remember one night, one of the tapes was left running after the session ended. The subject had already been escorted out, but the voice on the tape kept talking. "You will forget. You will forget the sound of my voice. You will forget what you are." The tape clicked, rewound, and started again, over and over. "You will forget what you are." I couldn't sleep that night. 2 weeks later, I met Subject 12. That wasn't his name, of course. They didn't give us real names. He was a man in his mid-30s, sharp eyes, military haircut. During the intake, he whispered to me, "Don't look into their eyes when they speak." That's how they put it in your head. I thought he was delusional. But when I looked into his file later, there was a red stamp across the top. Former military asset, Operation Delta Echo. During his session, he was placed under deep hypnosis and injected with a clear liquid. The lights dimmed. Dr. Clemens stood behind the glass, watching intently. I took notes as the voice on the speaker began. "Subject 12, you are in the room of mirrors. You are safe here. Tell us what you see." His eyes rolled back. His breathing slowed. "I see the door," he whispered. "It's open again." "What door?" "The one you told me never to open." Dr. Clemens leaned toward the intercom. "Open it." The man started screaming. His body convulsed violently. Every monitor on the wall spiked red. And then, silence. For 20 full seconds, everything stopped. Even the machines went quiet. No hum, no beeps, nothing. Then slowly, the voice of Subject 12 came through the microphone again. But it wasn't his voice anymore. "Who opened the door?" it said, calm and deep. "Who let him through?" Dr. Clemens smiled faintly and turned off the mic. "Session complete," he said, as if nothing had happened. Subject 12 was transferred the next day. I never saw him again. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I returned to the archive room after hours, using the key card one of the techs had left behind. Inside were rows of file cabinets, each marked with coded project names: Eidolon, Seraphim, Hypnosis Project, Delta Mirror. The air smelled of mold and magnetized tape. I found a folder labeled HYP47, Phase 3, Behavioral Convergence Tests. Inside were Polaroids, patients sitting blank-faced under hypnosis, IV drips attached, pupils dilated like black marbles. There were also pages of transcribed dialogues. I read one at random. Subject 3. I can see the room. Interviewer. Describe it. Subject 3. It's not a room. It's a mouth. Interviewer. A mouth? Subject 3. It's trying to swallow me. Another page detailed something called vocal pattern induction, where patients' speech patterns were altered to mirror specific frequencies, as if their voices could be used as control triggers. The last file was labeled Internal Memorandum, Phase 4 Activation. Date pending, awaiting approval from Dr. Clemens. And underneath, handwritten in pencil, not ready. The voice is awake. That was the night I decided to quit. But by then, it was already too late. On my last day, I went to pack my belongings. As I walked past the observation rooms, one of the tape machines was still playing. It wasn't one of our usual hypnosis loops. It was a recording of my own voice. "Daniel Mercer," it said softly, "you will remember everything they told you to forget." The lights flickered once, and then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, echoing in the empty hall. When I turned around, there was no one there, but the intercom buzzed to life above me. A low whisper came through the speaker. "The door's open again, Daniel. You shouldn't have looked." The intercom crackled again, then silence. For a moment, I thought I was hallucinating. Lack of sleep, stress, paranoia. But the voice, it wasn't random static. It said my name. I turned the recorder off and tried to steady my breathing. The hallway lights flickered once more, the hum of the fluorescent bulbs rising and falling like labored breathing. I could have walked out right then, through the north exit, down the long gravel path, into the cold autumn night. But something made me stop. It wasn't courage. It was obsession. I wanted to know what door the voice had meant. The elevator to the lower sublevels wasn't on the facility's blueprints. I'd only heard rumors, a restricted floor used for deep induction trials. But I'd seen Dr. Clemens use it once. He had a separate key card, darker than the rest, marked LZR. The same code was stamped on the side of several classified folders in the archive room. That night, I waited until 3 a.m., the time when the halls went dead silent, when the only sound was the slow rotation of tape reels behind closed doors. The elevator doors groaned open with a metallic sigh. I swiped my stolen keycard, half expecting it to deny me access. Instead, the panel flickered green. The ride down was long, longer than it should have been. The floor numbers didn't light up. Only a single indicator blinked faintly. Sublevel R. When the doors opened, the air that greeted me was different. It was colder, damp, chemical, metallic, and it smelled like something had been burned. Sublevel R wasn't like the rest of the facility. It looked unfinished, bare concrete walls, exposed pipes, hanging light bulbs swaying from frayed wires. I followed a narrow hallway until I found a metal door slightly ajar. A label above it read, "Audio Induction Chamber, Authorized Staff Only." Inside was a small recording studio, but unlike any I'd ever seen. 4 chairs surrounded a single microphone, suspended by thick black wires. Dozens of reel machines lined the walls, looping tapes at different speeds. Some reels were labeled frequency map trials, others simply voices. The air was thick with static. A faint vibration pulsed through the floor, like bass notes from music you couldn't hear. On the table was an open folder. Inside were EEG scans of multiple subjects, identical brainwave patterns, all synchronized. Below that was a single handwritten line. The sound aligns the mind. As I stared at it, one of the tape machines clicked to life on its own. The reels began to spin. A man's voice whispered through the speakers, low, calm, familiar. "Daniel Mercer, listen carefully." My blood went cold. That was my voice. "If you're hearing this, the conditioning is complete. You've reached the chamber. You weren't supposed to remember, but you always do." I stumbled back. The lights flickered violently, the sound rising in pitch. "Do not go to room 9. Do not look at the mirror. And for God's sake, do not listen to the second tape." Then the reel stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. I looked around the room again, and that's when I noticed it. a second tape recorder hidden beneath the table labeled in black ink. Tape number 2. Do not play. Every rational thought in my head screamed, don't do it. But curiosity, that same sick need to understand, drowned everything else. I pressed play. At first, nothing. Then a low hum, a rhythmic pulse almost like a heartbeat. Then came the voice. Not human, not mechanical, something between the two. The dream is real, Daniel. The experiment never ended. You were not hired. You were activated. I froze. Do you remember the door? The black one with no handle? I did. I'd seen it once, at the far end of the main hall, always locked. No markings except a faint burn around the frame. Open it, the voice said softly. It's time. The machines around me began to vibrate, their reels spinning faster, faster, until the air itself seemed to shudder. And then, everything went dark. When I came to, I was standing in front of the black door. Room 9? I don't remember walking there. I don't even remember leaving the sub-level. The air was freezing. My breath came out in short clouds. The door was pulsing faintly, as if something alive was moving beneath the metal. There was no handle, just a small indentation in the shape of a hand. Without thinking, I placed my palm against it. The metal was warm, and then it opened itself. The room beyond was pitch black. The smell hit me first. Formaldehyde, ozone, blood. Inside, I saw dozens of suspended figures, people floating in cylindrical tanks filled with liquid. Each wore a black headset covering their eyes and ears. Wires connected their skulls to the ceiling. Every tank had a number: 001, 002, 003, 004. The last one at the far end was labeled 012. I moved closer, and then I saw his face. Subject 12. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, but his lips were moving. I leaned closer to the glass. He's behind you, he mouthed. The intercom crackled behind me. Step away from the tanks, Daniel. I turned. Dr. Clemens stood in the doorway, his face half lit by the flickering light above. You weren't supposed to see this, Clemens said quietly. You weren't supposed to remember. He walked toward me, slow and deliberate, the sound of his shoes echoing in the dark. What is this? I demanded. Progress, he replied. The next stage of evolution. He gestured toward the floating subjects. We found a way to separate consciousness from the body, to access the mind directly. But it needed an anchor. Someone to hold the link open. I stared at him. Realization slowly dawning. Me. He smiled faintly. The first successful anchor. The perfect candidate. You said I was hired as an intern. You were recalled. We implanted the memory of recruitment after phase 1. You volunteered years ago, Daniel. My mind reeled. Bits of memory began to flash. Sterile rooms, whispers, a bright light. Someone counting backward from 10. We needed you to forget, Clemens said softly. Otherwise, the mind rejects the loop. The loop. Project Hypnosis wasn't meant to control others. It was meant to replicate you. Behind him, the tanks began to glow faintly. Each of the figures inside turned their heads toward me, in perfect unison. My own reflection stared back from every face. The room began to vibrate. The lights strobed violently, and I heard the low hum again. That sound from the tape room. I fell to my knees as a wave of nausea hit me. My vision blurred. It felt like my thoughts were being pulled apart, stretched across miles of static. Don't fight it, Clemens said, his voice distant now. You'll tear the connection. But I couldn't stop. Images flooded my head. The bus ride, the facility, the guards, the hypnosis chambers, all replaying in rapid succession, looping endlessly. Each time, something was different. Sometimes the woman at reception had no face. Sometimes the guards' reflections in their mirrored glasses weren't human. Sometimes I wasn't the one walking through the gate. And then, nothing. When I woke up, I was in the observation room. White walls, a single chair, a mirror on the far side. Dr. Clemens's voice came through the speaker. "Tell me, Daniel, what do you remember?" I looked around. My hands were trembling. "Everything," I whispered. "I remember everything." A pause. Then, "Good. That means the integration is nearly complete." I stood up, walked to the mirror. My reflection looked back, but not quite right. The eyes were wrong. The mouth moved slightly out of sync. "Who are you?" I whispered. The reflection smiled. "You are." The glass began to ripple, not break, not crack, but ripple like liquid. And from the other side, a hand pressed against it. My hand. When I woke up again, the world around me was silent. Not the comforting silence of dawn, but the suffocating kind that follows death. The lights above my bed flickered weakly, humming like dying insects. My wrists were still bound to the metal frame, but the restraints were looser now, as if someone had undone them halfway. The air smelled of rust, antiseptic, and something else. Burnt hair. I tried to move, but my muscles screamed in protest. My veins burned as if liquid fire ran through them. And then it hit me. They had injected me again. Another session, another experiment. But this time, something was different. I remembered. Fragments of the last session flickered in my head like broken film reels. Dr. Hale whispering, "Let him see." The sound of water dripping and the cold touch of electrodes pressed against my temples. But the voice that spoke to me during the hypnosis, the one that wasn't his, it was still there, whispering softly at the back of my mind. "You were never the subject. You were the control." I didn't understand. I didn't want to. All I knew was that I had to get out. I forced myself off the bed and staggered toward the door. The corridor outside was pitch black, except for the stuttering glow of emergency lights. Every step echoed. Somewhere far away, I could hear a generator struggling to stay alive. Halfway down the hall, I saw the first body. One of the orderlies, face twisted, eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. His skin was pale, blistered as though he'd been exposed to radiation. Beside him lay a clipboard with notes smeared in blood. I picked it up. Subject 27 has achieved synchronization. He speaks in multiple voices now. The doctor believes it's the signal. The words blurred in my vision. Multiple voices. The signal. I dropped the clipboard. Then a sound, metal clanging, echoing from the far end of the corridor. I froze. Through the flickering light, I saw a silhouette. Tall, unmoving, watching me. "Dr. Hale?" My voice cracked. No answer. The shape shifted, one slow, unnatural motion, then stepped closer. It wasn't Dr. Hale. It wasn't human. The thing moved like it had bones in the wrong places. Its head tilted too far to one side, the jaw unhinged like a broken doll's. I stumbled back into a treatment room, slammed the door shut, and pressed my back against it. My breath fogged the glass window as I tried to see. Nothing. Just darkness outside. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, right beside my ear. "Who are you?" I whispered. And from the other side came the same voice I had heard in hypnosis. Not Dr. Hale, not anyone alive. You let us in. Inside the treatment room, the air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Needles, tape reels, jars labeled with numbers. I saw one marked 27B. That was me. Inside the jar was a small black object, something like a piece of burnt flesh, except it pulsed faintly, as if alive. My stomach turned. I couldn't breathe. Then I saw the file cabinet half open, its contents spilling onto the floor. I reached down and found an envelope stamped with Project Epsilon, a name I'd never heard before. Inside were photographs, patients lined up in rows, each with wires in their heads, each with their eyes covered by black blindfolds. And at the center of every photo stood Dr. Hale, smiling. But there was something wrong about his shadow. In every photograph, his shadow wasn't his. It was taller, broader. It looked like it. The same figure I'd seen in the hallway. And written on the back of one photograph were 3 words in Dr. Hale's handwriting. Consciousness is contagious. The sirens began then, blaring through the entire facility. Red lights flashed in slow rhythm like a heartbeat. I ran. Through corridors I didn't recognize, past rooms filled with overturned gurneys and shattered glass. In one room, I saw dozens of tape recorders still spinning, whispering the same phrase over and over again in a monotone voice. Sleep deeper. Forget the door. Sleep deeper. Forget the door, I covered my ears, but the sound didn't stop. It was inside my head now. When I finally reached the main lab, the air was thick with smoke. Electrical wires hung from the ceiling, sparking. And there, at the far end of the room, Dr. Hale stood, staring into the void of a massive observation window. Behind the glass was a dark chamber, and inside it floated a body, suspended in some kind of fluid. "Doctor, what have you done?" I whispered. He turned slowly, his eyes hollow, blood leaking from his nose. "We opened the door," he said, and it spoke back. The glass behind him cracked, just once, then shattered completely. The black fluid spilled out like ink, flooding the floor. From within, something began to crawl out. It looked human at first, then didn't. Dozens of eyes blinked open where there should have been skin. Mouths whispered prayers in reverse. The thing twitched, then rose, towering over both of us. Dr. Hale fell to his knees, smiling through tears. "Do you see now? We are all one consciousness." The thing reached for him. He didn't scream. It simply absorbed him, flesh, bone, and sound, leaving nothing behind but the echo of his voice. "Sleep deeper." I ran. I don't know how long. The corridors stretched like they were alive, bending and twisting. Every door I opened led to another version of the same hallway. Every mirror I passed reflected someone who wasn't me. Eventually, I reached the records room. I barricaded the door and began writing this, my final account. If anyone finds these pages, know this. The Hypnosis Project wasn't about control. It was about creation. They found a way to record consciousness, to duplicate it through hypnosis and chemical induction. The experiments were never about patients. They were about hosts. And I was the first successful transfer. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I still hear them whispering through the walls, through the static, through me. They're not gone. They're inside. Silence. Recording ends. I never meant for this video to go viral. Back then, it was supposed to be just another urban exploration gone wrong upload. You know, the kind people binge at 2 a.m. with the lights off. The kind I used to watch. But Ravensfield Asylum wasn't like the others. I first heard about it in a forgotten online forum around late 2003. A post buried beneath pages of conspiracy threads and ghost stories. The username was echo_47, and the post title simply read, "Don't go to Ravensfield, they still hear you." No location pin, no coordinates, just a grainy photo of a crumbling hospital and a caption that looked handwritten on the image. "They used to record dreams here." That line haunted me. I was 26, broke, and running a failing YouTube channel called Dark Signal. My audience loved one thing: real places with real history. And if this asylum had a story, I was going to be the one to find it. So I dug deeper. Ravensfield State Asylum, shut down in 1979, officially for budget cuts and safety violations. But local archives hinted at something else. Missing patient files, unexplained power usage years after the closure, and whispers of continuing experiments under contract. The deeper I went, the more it felt like someone wanted the place erased. Perfect. I finally found its location buried inside an old county infrastructure PDF near the woods outside of Harrow County, Maine. No address, just a marker labeled Ravensfield Health Complex. I packed my gear, a Sony Hi8 camcorder, a small flashlight, extra batteries, and an old dictaphone I used for voice notes. I told my friend Mark I'd be offline for a couple of days, going up north for a shoot. He laughed, told me I was crazy to go alone. He was right. The drive up took 5 hours. By the time I reached the turnoff road, it was dusk. Fog clung to the trees like it didn't want to let go. The asylum sat at the end of a cracked service road, massive, silent, and half-eaten by vines. Its windows were boarded up, but behind the wood, I could see movement, shadows shifting in rhythm with the wind. I started recording. Friday, November 14th, 2003. Ravensfield Asylum, Harrow County. First impressions. It smells like rust and old paper. You can still feel the electricity in the air, like the building remembers what it was built for. My flashlight beam hit a faded sign by the front entrance. Ravensfield State Psychiatric Institute, EST, 1932, closed 1979. Someone had scratched words beneath it in the metal. We never left. I laughed nervously into the mic, pretending it didn't bother me. But something in my chest tightened. Inside, the air felt wrong, heavier somehow. Peeling wallpaper, water dripping from pipes, the smell of mildew and dust thick enough to taste. I started exploring the first corridor. Room after room was identical. Patient beds, overturned chairs, medical records frozen in time. But every few minutes, I'd hear something. A shuffle, a breath, a faint sound of a door clicking shut in the distance. Probably raccoons, I told the camera. But even then, I didn't believe myself. Down the main hallway, I found what looked like the administration office. Papers were scattered across the floor, some burned at the edges. I brushed off dust from one folder labeled Project Whisper. It was dated 1978. Inside, there were patient notes, all handwritten, some crossed out violently. The last entry read, Subject 9 exhibits complete auditory disassociation, reports hearing the voice in the walls. Experiment halted after staff injury. Further observation recommended by Dr. C. Halberg. There was no other information, no signatures, no continuation. Just a single line written in red ink at the bottom of the page. Silence is the only control. That's when I started hearing it. At first, it was just the hum, like feedback from an old speaker. But then it became clearer. A voice, faint, whispering. It came through my camcorder. I paused the recording, checked the mic connection. All fine. I rewound the tape to replay what I just recorded, and I heard it again, a whisper layered beneath my own voice. Keep recording. I froze. The words weren't mine. I tried to shake it off. Probably interference, I told myself. Maybe an old radio frequency or static distortion. But as I kept exploring, it got louder. Every time I turned a corner, the air pressure seemed to change. My ears popped like I was in an airplane. By the time I reached the east wing, I could barely breathe. The hallway walls were lined with peeling murals, patients holding hands, painted in smiling colors. But every single face had been scratched out. The last door at the end of the hall was marked Therapy Room B13. It was slightly ajar. Inside, the air was colder. There was an old reel-to-reel recorder still sitting on the desk, covered in dust. The tape inside was labeled Session 51, Subject 9. My hands trembled as I hit play. At first, only static. Then, a man's voice, calm, professional. Session 51. Patient appears receptive, initiating auditory phase sequence. Then a pause. Can you hear me? A second voice answered, weak, trembling. It's not you speaking. Who is speaking? The man asked. The room. Then silence, followed by a deep, low sound that rattled the speakers like thunder underwater. I stepped back instinctively. The lights flickered once, then everything went black. I don't know how long it stayed dark. When my flashlight flickered back on, the reel recorder had stopped spinning. But the tape was gone. The machine's reels were empty, the tape cut cleanly in the middle, and the air felt different, like someone else was in the room. Keep recording. This time, the whisper came from directly behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking, but the room was empty. Just the desk, the broken recorder, and the faint sound of something dripping from the ceiling. I aimed the camera upward. A black liquid seeped through the ceiling cracks, dripping onto the floor in slow, steady drops. It smelled like rust and salt. The fear didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly, the way cold seeps through skin. I backed out of the room, tripping over a fallen chair, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my throat. I didn't even realize I'd left the camera running. By the time I reached the main hall again, it was nearly pitch dark. My flashlight flickered, batteries dying fast. But through the grain of my camcorder, I saw something strange. Movement at the far end of the corridor. Someone standing perfectly still, facing the wall. Too tall to be human. The camcorder glitched. 1 frame, 2, 3, then froze on static. When it resumed, the hallway was empty. I ran outside, gasping for air. The night was still, the fog thicker than before. My car was parked just beyond the front gate, but for a moment, it looked farther away, as if the road had stretched. When I reached it, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the keys. I looked back once. The asylum stood silently, its windows glowing faintly red from inside, like it was alive. On the drive home, the radio refused to work. Just static. But in that static, I could swear I heard something familiar. Keep recording. I reached for the camera bag beside me. The red light on the camcorder was still blinking. Recording. Even though I'd turned it off hours ago. When I got home, I uploaded the footage. The file name had already changed itself. From Ravensfield footage 1.avi to theyhearyou.avi and inside the video timeline. A section I hadn't filmed. A clip only a few seconds long. A close-up of my sleeping face. Recorded from inside my car. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of my computer, staring at the upload bar crawling across the screen. It was 3:12 a.m. when the file finally finished processing, theyhearyou.avi. The thumbnail showed nothing, just static. But when I clicked play, it didn't start where I expected. It wasn't the asylum, it was my car. I was in the driver's seat, fast asleep, camera resting on the dashboard, recording me. I didn't remember falling asleep. I didn't remember hitting record. And as I watched, my stomach tightened. Because in the corner of the frame, barely visible in the fog outside the windshield, there was a figure standing in the road. Tall, still, facing me. Then the feed distorted, glitching in rhythmic pulses, like breathing. I shut off the monitor and stumbled back, heart pounding. Okay, it's just some old glitch in the tape, I whispered to myself. But the sound in my speakers didn't stop. Even though I'd closed the player, I could still hear static. And beneath that static, a faint whisper. Keep recording. I yanked the speaker's cord out of the tower. The whisper stopped, but I could still hear it, faintly, inside the room. By sunrise, I convinced myself I'd hallucinated. Maybe I'd been awake too long. I made coffee, opened the curtains. The world outside looked normal. Birds, cars, light traffic. No monsters. I tried editing the footage. Every time I scrubbed through the asylum sequence, the video desynced. The timeline would stretch, frames looping, repeating the same scene again and again. That hallway with the scratched-out murals. At 17:23 in the footage, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. My own voice. Can you hear me? Except I never said those words. Then came another sound, a low hum, like someone blowing air across an old microphone. I zoomed in on the waveform, enhanced the audio. There were layers of sound beneath the static, almost like multiple voices whispering at once. And if I slowed it down, it sounded like they were laughing. By afternoon, I started getting nosebleeds. It happened whenever I put on my headphones to review the footage. The moment that hum began, a sharp pain in my temples, then a metallic taste in my mouth. I stepped away from the desk, head spinning. The walls felt closer, like the air itself was vibrating. Then the lights flickered, and I heard my own voice from the living room. Keep recording. The TV was off. The camcorder sat on the couch, its red light blinking. Recording. I picked it up with trembling hands. There was no tape inside, but the viewfinder showed a live feed of me, standing in the living room. Only, it wasn't real time. The feed was lagging, 2, maybe 3 seconds behind. I waved my hand. The reflection on the camcorder delayed, then mimicked me. But on the third wave, it didn't. The reflection smiled. I dropped the camcorder. The screen cracked. The power in my apartment went out a second later. The silence afterward was thick, electric. I sat in the dark, breathing hard, every sound magnified. Then from outside, down the hallway, came a slow, rhythmic knock on my door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I didn't move. Then a voice, muffled through the door, but soft, calm. Mr. Adler? This is the Harrow County Police Department. We got a call about some kind of disturbance? I froze. I hadn't called anyone. Sir, we just need to make sure everything's okay. I looked through the peephole. A uniformed officer stood outside, but something was off. His badge was from Harrow County Sheriff's Office, the same name on the old asylum's property documents. Sir? He asked again. You were seen leaving the Ravensfield grounds yesterday. We'd like to ask you a few questions. My throat went dry. How did you... But before I could finish, the lights flickered back on for just a second, and in that flash, I saw the officer's reflection in the window beside the door. He wasn't moving, and his face was wrong, too long, too still, like he was wearing someone else's skin. I backed away slowly. Please open the door, he said. His tone changed, lower, more distorted. You left something there. Then, silence. When I finally looked through the peephole again, he was gone. Only a faint trail of muddy footprints led away from the door. That night, I couldn't bring myself to touch the camera. I shoved it in the closet and locked it inside. But every hour or so I could hear it beep, the sound it made when recording stopped. I unplugged everything in the apartment, and still, that faint sound continued. Beep, beep, beep. I smashed the door to the closet open and found the camcorder gone. In its place, a VHS tape, labeled Session 52, Subject 10. I didn't want to play it. I shouldn't have played it. But of course I did. I dug out my old VCR, plugged it into the TV. The screen crackled alive with static, then slowly formed an image, an old hospital room. Same gray tiles, same flickering ceiling light. A man sat in a chair, hands tied. His face was obscured by static distortion, like the signal didn't want me to see him clearly. Off-screen, a voice asked, "Do you remember your name?" The man tilted his head. "No, but I remember yours. Whose?" "The one holding the camera." My stomach dropped. Then the man lifted his head, and even through the distortion, I could recognize the shirt he was wearing. It was mine. "Keep recording," he said. The screen went black. I don't remember much after that. I woke up hours later on the floor, bleeding from my nose again, the TV screen flashing with a single phrase in white text: "Transfer successful." I yanked the power cord, threw the VCR across the room. The TV kept flashing, the same phrase, over and over. "Transfer successful, transfer successful, transfer successful." Then, silence. And from the hallway outside, a faint echo of my own voice. "Keep recording." For the next 2 days, I stayed offline. No uploads, no messages. But strange things started happening. Neighbors said they saw me leave my apartment at night. Except, I hadn't. One of them even showed me footage from the security camera near the elevator. It was me, carrying the camcorder, walking out at 2:47 a.m. But I had been in bed. I didn't even own the clothes that version of me was wearing, an old Ravensfield staff coat. On the third night, I tried to destroy the footage. I deleted the theyhearyou.avi file from every drive, emptied the recycle bin, formatted the memory cards, but the file kept coming back. Every time I restarted my computer, a new copy appeared. Same size, same timestamp, but a new name. theyhearyou_002.avi, theyhearyou_003.avi, theyhearyou_004.avi, each version slightly longer than the last. When I finally played the fifth one, the footage had changed. The camera was back inside the asylum, and this time, I was behind it. walking down that same hallway with the murals. Only this time, the faces on the walls weren't scratched out. They were smiling again. I don't remember walking down the final stairwell. I only remember the sound, a long, hollow hum beneath my feet, like a generator pulsing somewhere deep in the bowels of Ravensfield. The light from my flashlight flickered in my hand, as if reacting to the sound. My breath made small clouds in the air. The deeper I went, the colder it became. When I reached the bottom, I found a metal door half open. On it, the words were carved in rusted metal letters. Sub-level 7, authorized personnel only. My keycard shouldn't have worked here, but when I swiped it across the broken reader, the green light blinked once, and the lock clicked open, almost welcoming me in. Inside, the corridor was lined with reinforced glass panels, but every single one was shattered from the inside. The walls had messages scratched into the paint in what looked like dried blood and fingernails. One line appeared over and over again. Remember yourself. There were no lights, only emergency bulbs faintly glowing in red. I walked past the broken cells, each one containing something left behind. A chair bolted to the floor, leather straps, EEG caps, and old tape reels scattered on the ground. One reel still sat inside a player, labeled in faded ink. Session number 101, subject M. Hale. My name. I froze. I pressed the play button. At first, there was only static. Then a voice, my own, came through the speakers, trembling and exhausted. Day. I don't know what day it is anymore. Dr. Crow says this is all part of conditioning, but I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I wake up in another body. Then came Dr. Crow's voice, low and calm. Focus on the memory, Marcus. Describe what you see. I heard myself sobbing. There's a mirror. Someone's standing behind me, but it's me. It's me watching myself, the reel cut off there. My pulse went wild. I staggered back, the flashlight trembling in my hand. The memories began to surface, not like dreams, but like buried photographs suddenly developing in my mind. I remembered sitting in that same chair, the leather against my wrists, the metronome ticking in the dark, Crow's voice whispering numbers, 10, 9, 8, and then waking up somewhere else entirely. At the end of the corridor, a heavy vault door stood open, leading into a large circular chamber. Dozens of reclining chairs surrounded a single elevated console at the center. Each chair was connected to the console by thick cables, like veins leading into a metal heart. Old CRT monitors hung from the ceiling, displaying static. One flickered, showing a single image for a split second. My own face staring straight back, with eyes rolled white. I slowly approached the console. On it, a dusty folder sat under the light of a flickering bulb. The label read, Project Hypnosis. Primary subject, Marcus Hale, cognitive duplication phase. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were photographs of me at various ages, in a lab coat, in a hospital bed, hooked up to machines, and then, horrifyingly, standing next to myself in the same frame. It hit me like a physical blow, the flashes of déjà vu, the dreams that felt like memories, the faces of orderlies who swore they'd met me before. They weren't hallucinations, they were bleed-throughs, fragments of earlier versions of me. Dr. Crow had never been experimenting on patients. He had been experimenting on me. Every time I woke up after a session, it wasn't sleep. It was a reset. They'd been copying my consciousness, splitting it, testing how far the human mind could be stretched before it fractured entirely. And I had volunteered for it. At least the first version of me had. There was movement behind me. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark, and froze. Standing near the doorway was me, or something that looked like me but older. Its skin was pale, its eyes sunken. It moved in stiff, unnatural motions, like a puppet trying to remember how to walk. "Don't go further," it whispered in my voice. "Please, you'll start the loop again." "What are you talking about?" I gasped. It shook its head slowly, like someone reciting a confession too many times to count. "You can't end it. You can only wake up somewhere else." Then it smiled, a small, broken smile, and stepped backward into the darkness. The echo of its footsteps dissolved into silence. On the console, a red light blinked, a recording device still active. I pressed play. Dr. Crow's voice filled the room, calm and clinical. Subject Hale exhibits extreme instability in the 11th iteration. Memory degradation has increased. However, cognitive duplication remains stable. Proceeding with phase 12 at 0300 hours, then the tape clicked. Another voice came in. Mine again. Weak, desperate. "If anyone finds this, you have to destroy this place. None of it's real anymore. I'm not real anymore." The recording ended with a long tone that bled into the hum of the machines. Something began to flicker on the monitors again. Static, then images. Of the stairwell, the corridor, the same route I had just taken to get here. And then, a live feed. Of me, standing at the console, looking into the screen. But behind me, in the video, another figure was visible. Walking up slowly, its movements distorted, like a glitch in a film reel. I turned around. Nothing. When I looked back, the monitors all showed the same words in bright white text. "Wake up." The hum in the floor intensified until the entire chamber vibrated. The screens began to explode one by one, glass spraying across the floor. I stumbled back toward the vault door, but as I reached it, a blinding white light engulfed the room. And suddenly, silence. I woke up in my office. Morning sunlight through the blinds. The hum of the fluorescent light overhead. My notepad on the desk, filled with scribbles I didn't recognize. And a voice recording device beside me, still running. I pressed play. "Day 1, I heard myself say. "My name is Dr. Marcus Hale, and I've been assigned to Project Hypnosis at Ravensfield Asylum." The pen slipped from my hand. Outside my office, I heard footsteps, familiar ones. A soft knock. Then Dr. Crow's voice through the door. "Marcus? Are you ready for today's session?"